I didn't think that one day I would be able to lose the two people closest to me. My friend couldn't keep his instrument locked up, and my wife couldn't resist the temptation. In any case, I don't care anymore. I knew that I was in a better position than them. Karma would do its job. It was only a matter of time. Not only am I terrible at judging people's characters, but it seems I'm clueless about love as well. I just witnessed my college best friend driving away from my home with my wife, likely never to return. Just 48 hours ago, things felt entirely different at the start of this weekend. I was concerned about how my wife, whom I've loved for 2 decades, would get along with my old college roommate, who was visiting from out of town. Larry could be difficult at times, and my wife, Tracy, didn't tolerate arrogance well. Tracy would be alone with Larry at the house for about an hour, on Friday evening until I rivet home, and I could foresee potential trouble brewing for the entire weekend if anything went wrong during that time. However, I had cautioned Larry to behave himself until I returned, so that if he decided to act unpleasantly, at least I would be there to intervene. Larry and I had been roommates during our final 2 years of college, and during that time he was like a brother to me. However, after college, we ended up with jobs on opposite sides of the country, and despite both getting married and starting families, we hadn't managed to visit each other. Nevertheless, he had kept in touch via phone. When his business brought him to town for a 4-day conference, he reached out to me to arrange a meetup. Without hesitation, I invited him to stay for the weekend, despite knowing that Tracy might not be thrilled about it. So when I walked in the door on Friday evening, I was relieved to find Larry and Tracy engaged in conversation on opposite ends of the sofa in the den. Larry looked relaxed in sweatpants and a golf shirt, casually holding a beer, while Tracy, as stunning as ever, wore white shorts and a snug red top that accentuated her curves. Tracy, who at 45 looked more like 35 with her long blonde hair and captivating blue eyes, maintained her gym-toned physique. Feeling fortunate, I could sense from Larry's expression that he too recognized Tracy's beauty. When I entered the room, Tracy seemed a little embarrassed, but she didn't show it. Then I turned to her to hug her, and for a moment I smelled a familiar scent from her hair, reminiscent of Larry's scent. I waved it off, assuming it was a mistake. Such a strong scent couldn't have come from a simple welcome hug, even if Tracy was hugging Larry. After changing into comfortable clothes, I took a beer and settled into my lazy boy on the other side of the room. Larry and I chatted while Tracy prepared a delicious meal. Not only is she attractive, but she's also an excellent cook. We indulged at the table before moving to the den to watch a movie. Tracy joined us, sitting at the opposite end of the sofa from Larry. As we watched a movie on Netflix and discussed plans to show Larry around the city the next morning, I excused myself around 11, feeling tired. I suggested Tracy could stay and keep Larry company since she typically stays up later than I do. Although I expected her to join me, considering her apparent discomfort around Larry, I was surprised when she opted to stay with him. Despite my slight unease, I trusted Tracy implicitly, as she had never given me a reason to doubt her in our 20 years of marriage. I went to the bathroom and got into bed, expecting to fall asleep quickly, as I usually do when I'm alone. However, my head was restless, and it prevented me from falling asleep. After 20 minutes, I decided to calm myself down and got up, put on a bathrobe, and headed to the office. Stepping noiselessly on the carpet, I inadvertently approached them. Assuming they were watching TV since I couldn't hear the conversations, I approached the room. Before I entered, I noticed that Tracy was not in her usual place on the couch. Instead, she sat face-to-face with Larry on the other end of the couch, putting her hand on Larry. They looked into each other's eyes. I was completely speechless at that moment. To be honest, I didn't understand at all how this could happen. Tracy never gave me any signs of concern, and everything was fine with us in bed life. Why? We had an active bed life, which we still did 2 or 3 times a week. Suddenly, Larry leaned in and passionately kissed my wife on the lips, to which she offered no resistance. I stood there, utterly stunned. After a brief kiss, Tracy beckoned to Larry with her finger and stood up. I retreated to the bedroom and slipped back into bed, pretending to be asleep. Tracy opened the door, and for a moment, I thought this dreadful series of events was over. and she was coming to bed. Instead, she quietly entered the room, glanced at me to ensure I was asleep, and then left the room. As I rose and listened at our bedroom door, I overheard some hushed conversation before they both headed into the guest room, where Larry was staying. In that instant, my heart shattered. I knew she was no longer mine. She belonged to him. 20 years. Gone. Just like that. I fought against the overwhelming urge to vomit right then and there. I also resisted the temptation to storm into the guest room and confront them, or to physically retaliate against both of them. Sure, it might have brought temporary satisfaction, but in that moment, it didn't matter. The actual act itself, which I could have interrupted, wasn't the focal point. What mattered was the fact that she had consented to it, had agreed to betray me, to discard my love, even if only temporarily, in order to commit adultery. She had agreed to violate my trust. Yes, I could have halted the act, at least momentarily, but I couldn't surveil her constantly, and if she could breach my trust once, what would stop her from doing it again? Sure, she might cry and plead for forgiveness, and perhaps even genuinely mean it now, but a trust that's been broken once is easier to break a second time. And beyond. Regarding Larry, I couldn't fathom that he would betray me like this, someone who was akin to a brother. Perhaps that's why his first wife, Tiffany, divorced him 15 years ago, and why his second wife, Marguerite, also left him. How could I have been so blind not to see it coming? Instead of rushing into the guest room, I grabbed my phone and opened the home security app. I watched the inevitable scene unfold as the system documented it for posterity. It didn't take long for Larry to be on the bed with my wife. Yes, I witnessed the whole thing, which lasted about 15 minutes. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to figure out how I had inadvertently contributed to the situation, beyond just being hospitable to an old friend. They lay in bed together for approximately 10 minutes, engaged in conversation. Then Tracy got out of bed and went into the bathroom. I closed the security app, returned to bed, and pretended to be asleep. About 5 minutes later, she quietly got back into bed on her side. I kept my back turned to her to conceal my tear-streaked face, but I remained awake throughout the night. Judging by her breathing, she fell asleep quickly, likely due to the satisfying encounter we had earlier. Around 7 a.m., Tracy got up, took some clothes from her closet, and went into the bathroom without realizing I was awake. I waited until I heard her leave the bathroom and head to the kitchen before getting up, putting on a robe and joining her there. That's when I found her and Larry, both fully dressed and preparing to go somewhere. Clearly, last night's affair had emboldened them both. "Are we going somewhere?" I inquired innocently, despite not being dressed for an outing. Larry and I are just popping over to Starbucks for a latte. We'll be back soon, all right?" Tracy swiftly responded before ushering Larry out the door. Truthfully, I was quite fine with them leaving because I had work to attend to, and estimated I had about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours at most, assuming they'd make a pit stop for some intimate time. Hastily, I got dressed, hopped into my car, and drove to our bank, where I promptly closed our joint checking and savings accounts, opening a new checking account in my name only. I obtained a cashier's check for the savings account funds. Additionally, I closed the credit card linked to the bank account and opened a new one solely in my name. Having friends who had gone through divorces proved helpful. I knew precisely what steps to take. I also contacted my other credit card company and requested our limit be reduced to $1,000 above our current balance, just in case Tracy needed to make a purchase while out with Larry, say, for a genuine cup of coffee. She might be annoyed but not overly suspicious if one card had issues, as long as the other remained functional. I returned to the house after about an hour, and as I had expected, they hadn't returned yet. Finally, they came back about 2 hours later, both appearing a bit flushed and slightly out of breath, as if they had been on a long, brisk walk on a spring morning. Yeah, right. I continued with my pretense. "What, you didn't bring anything back for me?" I inquired. What was I thinking?" Tracy responded, attempting to appear apologetic. Tracy and I took Larry to visit our city zoo and our local art museum, then treated him to dinner at one of the nicer restaurants in town. Throughout the entire day, they kept exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to throttle both of them or laugh at their attempts to deceive me. Once again, I rose at 11, intending to retire for the night, but unsurprisingly, Tracy showed no inclination to accompany me. I activated the app and commenced recording while lying in bed, attempting to maintain steady breaths. Approximately 30 minutes later, Tracy stealthily entered the room, approaching my side to ensure I was asleep, before quietly departing once satisfied with my faculty. After her departure, I donned some shorts and patiently waited in the darkness until I heard their activities begin. Subsequently, I stealthily made my way to the kitchen and located her Percy. Evidently, Tracy and Larry hadn't exhausted all their time engaging in intimacy earlier in the day, as she must have utilized a debit card machine to make a purchase online, securing an airline ticket. I extracted 5 pristine $100 bills from the bank envelope, meticulously replacing them with strips of newspaper to maintain the appearance of fullness, and then restored both the envelope and the etiquette to her purse. The contemptible woman, I said to myself upon returning to bed, realizing not only was she unfaithful, but she was also planning to abscond with him after just 2 days. After 20 years, I must truly be inept at this whole husband thing. Tracy and Larry took an awfully long time this time around. It seemed like they might have done it twice with a short break in between. I didn't bother watching this time, didn't need to, though I did record it. She slipped into bed quietly around 2 a.m., snuggled up to me briefly, and fell asleep within 5 minutes. Once again, I spent the entire night awake. Around 8 a.m., I heard Larry in the bathroom. After he finished, I heard him briefly stop in the kitchen, then heard him leave the house. I assumed he was going to wait in his rental car. Tracy got up shortly after he left, gathered some clothes quietly, grabbed a suitcase from the closet, and headed into the bathroom. That was my signal to put on my shorts and wait by the front door. Tracy looked lightly made up and dressed casually in jeans and a top when she emerged from the bathroom, and the way she carried the suitcase indicated it was already packed. She didn't notice me sitting in the living room chair about 10 feet away from the door, and was about to grab the handle when I spoke up, calmly but firmly. After 20 years, I don't even deserve a simple goodbye. Not even a "screw you, jerk." Nothing. At least I caught her off guard, and she literally jumped back from the door. "Bob, Obviously. Maintaining my composure required every ounce of willpower I possessed. I held the advantage in this situation, and I intended to fully exploit it. "Really, Tracy, after 20 years, is this how it all ends? I do love you, Bob, truly, but I don't think you'd understand. I was just trying to spare you," she stuttered. "How considerate of you, Tracy," I responded calmly. She attempted to speak, faltered, tried again, stumbled over her words, and ended up sounding like Porky Pig. "That's enough. It's time for you to leave. Lover boy must be getting anxious by now," I stated. Tracy appeared shocked, clearly not anticipating this turn of events. "Aren't you going to ask me to stay?" she muttered. "Nope. It's quite clear you don't love me, so why would I want you to stay? Maybe you'll get hit by a bus in LA if I'm lucky." She stuttered once more. I gestured towards the door and she departed. I listened as Larry's rented car pulled away from the driveway. I was feeling satisfied with the confusion I had caused in Tracy's mind and the dent I had made in her wallet. Not an ounce of guilt weighed on me. Screw her. 20 minutes later, I headed to the hardware store to purchase 3 new door lock sets and a new remote for the garage door. After installing everything and ensuring it worked, I settled into my lazy boy to make the most difficult phone call of my life, informing our 18-year-old daughter that her mother had cheated on me and left. Layla is a lovely child, a spitting image of her mother. She came into our lives 2 years after Tracy and I got married. We attempted to expand our family after her arrival, but for reasons unknown, it didn't happen. So, when we reached our 10-year anniversary, Tracy opted for 2-ball ligation. That decision meant no more condoms for me or birth control pills for her, and we were both content with that. Or so I thought, until Friday came. When I called Layla on Sunday morning, shortly before 9, She felt that something was wrong. She asked, and I confirmed it. "Pumpkin, your mom left me not so long ago. She spent 2 days with my former college roommate and then left with him about an hour ago. I felt it was important that you hear it from me first." "What?" she exclaimed. "Did you let Mom be with your college roommate and then let her leave with him?" "No, that's not what I meant. I didn't allow her to have a relationship with Larry. She made that choice herself after I went to bed. But I caught them." "So you ran into them cruelly?" she shouted back at me. At that moment, I spoke slowly and carefully. Layla didn't speak very coherently. "No, baby, when I found out what happened, I left them alone. The fact that your mother was prone to this meant that I had already lost her. At that moment, none of them understood what I knew. Their decision to leave was entirely their own. However, I talked to your mother before she left. Pumpkin, I don't want to drag you into this. I want you to continue loving your mom. You don't have to approve of her actions as long as you and I are fine." "Well, I think she's acting like a woman of easy virtue, Dad, and you don't have to put up with it. Have you ever been tempted to quarrel with your friend?" "Everyone will face the consequences, baby, in their own time." After ending my call with Layla, I reached out to Tracy's parents. Until that point, we had always had a good relationship, but I anticipated that it would soon change. Nonetheless, I wanted them to hear my side of the story, as Tracy's version could differ significantly. As expected, Tracy's parents didn't react well to the news. After all, she's their daughter. However, when they began to insult me, I took a strategic approach. I sent them an email with a screenshot from the first night out, showing their daughter in a compromising position. With no response from them, I concluded that the conversation and our relationship were over. On Monday, I contacted a lawyer recommended by a friend who had gone through a divorce. It turned out that this lawyer had been thoroughly outmatched by his ex-wife's lawyer, and that's who he suggested I consult when I called for advice on Sunday. Thankfully, with the support of my boss, I managed to meet with Jana Wilhelm that Thursday. My initial impression of her was that she was someone you wouldn't want to go up against. Living in a state where fault is considered in divorce proceedings, I was able to demand a lot when I filed for divorce citing infidelity. And my attorney was more than capable of handling the challenge. Ultimately, I ended up with the house and 75% of our joint assets. Tracy attempted to argue that she wasn't earning as much as she did during our marriage, but Ms. Wilhelm effectively argued to the court that Tracy voluntarily left her job to move to California, and therefore shouldn't expect me to financially compensate her for that decision. Despite Tracy's resistance to the divorce, it only took me 6 months to attain freedom. Then began the true challenge, grappling with lingering uncertainties about my adequacy as a husband. I had believed Tracy and I had a strong marriage, yet it crumbled in just 2 days. 2 damn days. During the divorce proceedings, my social life dwindled. I mostly remained at home, and when I did go out, I had no interest in female company. Even after the divorce was finalized, I lacked the inclination to seek companionship. Undoubtedly, I was shattered, a fact I acknowledged as I sought the help of a therapist. Coincidentally, she happened to be tending bar at Chuck's, a cozy establishment known for its hard rock music, premium drinks, and a clientele eager to engage in banter with newcomers. Adele had a knack for effortlessly mixing whiskey and ice, keeping the bar lively and managing rowdy patrons with ease. She believed everyone had a story, making it her mission to listen to them all. Despite my usual preference for sitting alone at a back table during my visits, Adele decided it was my turn to share. Summoned by one of her servers, I hesitated, but was informed it wasn't a request. It was a command. Reluctantly, I made my way to the far end of the bar, dubbed Adele's office. As I sipped my Crown Royal Black, Adele approached, introducing herself despite her already familiar presence. She astutely noticed the ring mark on my finger, inquiring about my divorce and years of marriage. Impressed by her perceptiveness, I found myself divulging the details of my failed marriage and subsequent life, all for the price of a $10 drink, rather than the usual $100 per hour therapy session. Adele, roughly my age, possessed the broad shoulders reminiscent of a former swimmer and the muscular arms of a female weightlifter. Her hair, a blend of two-tone brown and blonde, typically cascaded down her shoulders, and she opted for minimal makeup, if any. She exuded a tomboyish vibe, akin to that of a protective older sister, packaged in a frame standing about 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighing 120 pounds. Direct and candid, she didn't shy away from speaking her mind, and she didn't hesitate to point out that my solitary demeanor at the back of the bar wasn't doing me any favors. Taking her advice, I relocated to the front of the bar and engaged in the lively banter. Whether by chance or not, my mood noticeably improved, and suddenly, life offered more than just the routine of work, which had consumed much of the past year. I even ventured out on a few dates, devoid of physical intimacy, reminiscent of high school courting. Upon returning from a Saturday night date around 10 o'clock, my mood plummeted when I noticed a beat-up Chevy parked smack dab in the middle of my driveway. Furious, I pulled over to the curb and hopped out of my car, ready to confront whoever dared to block my entrance. As I stormed towards the car, Tracy emerged from the driver's side, giving me a coy smile that used to melt my heart. Damn. "Hey, Bob," she greeted cheerfully. I was far from cheerful about this unexpected encounter. I had hoped to never lay eyes on her again. Despite my feelings, I couldn't help but notice that she looked pretty good in her snug jeans and form-fitting sweater. However, even with a quick glance, it was evident she had lost some of her toned physique and gained a few wrinkles. Perhaps life in California with Larry wasn't as glamorous as she had made it out to be. If her car was any indication, it certainly wasn't. Once I realized she wasn't merely an intruder in my driveway, my approach towards her slowed. However, I stopped a few feet away from her, unwilling to offer any form of affection, not even a brief embrace or a kiss on the cheek. I lack that level of civility or forgiveness. "Not even a hug after 20 years?" Tracy inquired, extending her arms towards me. I regarded her with skepticism, maintaining my distance as I pondered her intentions. "I won't bite, Bob. I simply wanted to talk and catch up. I admit I was rather rude when I left last year. Should we continue this conversation indoors, or would you prefer to remain out here in the driveway for the neighbors to gossip? It seems you've changed the lock since last year," she remarked. I welcomed her inside and guided her to the kitchen. We took seats at the table, positioned in chairs opposite each other. "You could at least offer a girl a drink, you know." "Have your manners vanished along with me," she remarked. "I don't keep any Riesling around anymore," I replied. "There's no one here to drink it. But I know you've got Tennessee honey. I'll take a shot of that," she said. It was a surprise. Tracy never used to drink hard liquor when we were together. I poured us both shots and passed one to her. She accepted it with her left hand, and I noticed she still wore her wedding rings. "A nice touch," I commented. "I see yours is gone," she replied. "So where is the jerk lurking?" I inquired. "Probably back in California," she said. "We split up about a month ago. Besides that big ego of his, he really didn't offer me anything I wanted or needed." I shouldn't have, but I couldn't resist. It had been eating away at me for a year, and I needed an answer. "So you left me after 20 years because Larry has a 9-inch pole?" I asked incredulously. Tracy's expression twisted strangely, and beads of sweat stood out on her forehead. I had a feeling that her forthcoming answer would finally reveal the truth. "Yes, more or less, I believe," she murmured almost inaudibly. I exclaimed, causing her to recoil from the table. "Are you serious about this? How could you give up 20 years of marriage to some guy just because he has a good instrument?" "I can't explain it," she began. "I was amazed when I saw it, and I wanted to try it. I've never seen such tools in my life." "Shut up," I interrupted. "I have proof on video, and if it was love, then you are really promiscuous." "Well, then call it what you want, but for the first couple of months, I felt an irresistible desire to possess him. As for my personal life, I had difficulty finding a job after I suddenly quit my job here, which was detrimental to me. In addition, he had financial difficulties due to child support payments, so it was like a daily struggle. Eventually, he was fired for misuse of his company's credit card, It turned out that someone had alerted the company's internal audit department that he had used the card to buy my plane ticket, and he blamed me for it. However, upon further investigation, it turned out that he had been abusing the card for personal expenses for some time. As a result, we decided to break up, and I decided to return home in the hope of reconciling with my former employer, and perhaps rekindle the feelings that you may still have for me. I couldn't help but smile inwardly when she mentioned Larry possibly getting fired for using his company credit card to buy her plane ticket. When I saw the e-ticket, I realized that Tracy's card wouldn't have covered both the cash and the ticket. I figured Larry didn't have the money, so he likely just used his company card and hoped to conceal it. The audit department was very grateful for my tip-off. "I'll give you top marks for audacity," I retorted. "You didn't care about my feelings when you left. If I hadn't accidentally stumbled upon the truth, you would have walked away with both my heart and my dignity, and you couldn't care less. Thank goodness I found out, so you only took my heart, and I got to keep my dignity. So no, there's no more space in my heart for you. I'll always have some lingering affection for you. I can't seem to shake off that stain. But you need to stay away from me as far as possible. Who knows, maybe our daughter might still have a little room in her heart for you." "Well, I had to give it a shot," she said as she stood up. Slowly, she removed both of her rings and held them out to me. I shook my head slowly. "Keep them. Maybe they'll come in handy for a down payment on a new car when this one gives out." "I'm truly sorry I hurt you, Bob," she said. "No, Tracy, you're truly sorry that I'm not a pushover and you screwed up something really good. Maybe someday down the line you'll be a little sorry for hurting me." And for the second time, Tracy walked out of my life. Meeting Tracy again turned my life upside down. I've been in a gloomy mood at work all week. Fortunately, when I went to Chuck's on Friday night in search of food, strong drinks, and a dose of common sense, Adele was working at the bar. She felt that something was wrong just by looking into my eyes, she noticed, putting a double portion of Crown Black in front of me. "She came, didn't she?" asked Adele. I nodded. "Was I really so terrible that she dumped me after just 2 days?" I whispered to Adele. She claimed that it was all because of his 9-inch instrument and because of the incredible sensations she felt when doing it. She felt so amazing that she was ready to give up a lasting 20-year marriage. Is it really that simple? And then, a year later, when the novelty of his instrument began to fade, she wanted to come back to my house, hoping that I was trusting and flighty enough to take her back. Even if I was stupid enough to think about it, how soon would she find someone with a 10-inch tool? Adele grabbed the entire bottle of Crown Black, took my hand, and led me to a table next to the bar. She refilled my glass and poured herself one too. She asked one of the waiters to temporarily replace her. "Bob, have you ever heard the term instrument freak?" "I've heard it a few times," so I nodded. "I think it's a real phenomenon, Bob. According to my observations, this does not happen often, but when it happens, a woman seems to lose all rationality and can only act according to her impulses, in much the same way that men sometimes allow their desires to dictate their actions. But it happens much less often in women than in men, but when it does happen, the game is almost over for her. The unspoken truth that exists between the sexes is that most men are able to share a bed and emotions, while most women find it difficult. Many men can enter into purely physical contacts, leave, and not think about it. But for us women, it's often not that easy. When a man gives us pleasure, at that moment we may have feelings for him, perhaps even lasting ones. And if we believe that we can continue to experience this pleasure, we can fall in love with him, even if we already have another partner in mind. That's when things get really complicated. I suppose that's exactly what happened to your Tracy. This may be an isolated incident, or it may happen every time she gets in touch with someone new. It's not about you, Bob. As they say, it's not about you, it's about me. It couldn't be more appropriate in this situation, Bob. But she still had the choice to say no the first time, and that could have been the end of it, I said. You're right about that, Bob. With these words, Adele and I got up from our seats, took glasses and a bottle, and returned to the bar. It's time to move on with life. 2 weeks later at work, I received a voicemail from someone named Levon Brown from the bank. where Tracy used to work and was attempting to reconnect with. Great, I mused. Does she expect me to provide her with a positive character reference? Not likely. However, having been raised with manners, I felt obligated to return the call, so I did, preparing myself for what I anticipated. Mr. Kingsland, you may not know me, but I'm familiar with you, at least by reputation, through your ex-wife. While this may be forward, I was wondering if we could meet up for a drink sometime. Mr. Kingsland? Mr. Kingsland? I snapped back to reality from the alternate universe I had drifted into, took a deep breath, and responded, Miss Brown, I'm not sure what game you're playing, but if it's got anything to do with my ex-wife, count me out. Mr. Kingsland, Bob, this has absolutely nothing to do with your ex-wife, though her decision to divorce you is why I'm reaching out. Over the 10 years we worked together, she always praised you as an incredible husband, father, and lover. Now that you're single, I'm curious to see if she was right. I've been divorced for about 5 years myself, and it feels like all the good ones are taken. When I saw your ex at the building earlier this week trying to get a job here, it occurred to me that you might be available and… All right, I'll take your word for it. So, why don't we meet for drinks at Chuck's on Friday night? I preferred the meeting to be on my familiar ground, just in case she was a pawn from Tracy, or if things didn't pan out. If she was indeed a pawn from Tracy, then I sincerely pitied her because I knew Adele would handle her mercilessly in more ways than one. I wrapped up work promptly at 5 on Friday and made my way to Chuck's to update Adele on the evening's plans. As expected, she assured me of her support. I took a seat towards the rear of the room, keeping a vigilant watch on the entrance. Just as the clock struck 6, a tall, attractive brunette in a classic little black dress entered, made her way to the bar, and inquired with Adele about my presence. Adele gestured towards my table, and Levon Brown made her approach on 3-inch heels. As she approached, I noticed Adele in the background giving me a thumbs up. As she neared my table, I stood up out of habit, and she extended her hand for a firm handshake. I estimated her to be around 45 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, weighing 125 pounds with long hair, average-sized bust, and a slender waist. She possessed a certain prettiness, though not strikingly beautiful, and her blue eyes sparkled despite the dim lighting of the bar. At least she was pleasant to look at. About 30 minutes into our conversation, she shared her experience of divorcing her husband of 18 years due to his lax interpretation of marital fidelity. In turn, I disclosed my own situation with Tracy, explaining that while she hadn't divorced me, I had initiated the divorce because I upheld my vows. She seemed genuinely impressed by my stance. An hour later, I ordered dinner, and Levon and I indulged in everything from appetizers to dessert. She admitted she had never been to Chuck's before, but declared it would now become a regular spot for her. I assured her I'd be more than happy to accompany her here any time she wished. We refrained from intimacy on our initial date, a decision I believe was wise for both of us. However, as the evening drew to a close, I escorted her to her car and initiated a gentle kiss on her irresistibly soft lips. She met my advance without hesitation, perhaps even welcoming it. We promptly scheduled another rendezvous for the following Friday at Chuck's, and as she drove off into the night, I returned inside feeling triumphant. "Seems like things went smoothly," remarked Adele as I approached the bar for a nightcap. "Drinks are on me." "No, big sis, this one's on me." The anticipation for the next Friday was palpable. Work, which had become my refuge during tough times, now felt like a thrilling new chapter. Even my boss noticed my renewed vigor, especially after I finally cracked a long-standing engineering problem, promising significant savings for our project. For the second consecutive week, Levon Brown arrived at Chuck's right on schedule. She donned a stunning low-cut red dress that accentuated her figure, prompting me to request a twirl. Though her cheeks matched the color of her dress, she obliged with a bashful smile. We had an amazing dinner and a wonderful time together. I invited her back to my place afterward, where we spent some time cuddling on the couch like teenagers. Despite how amazing she looked, I felt it wasn't the right moment for any further intimacy. so we had a brief discussion about how to spend the rest of the night. Since she followed me to my place, she had to leave first. As I opened the front door for her, she gave me a mischievous grin and kissed me passionately. I was impressed by how she ended the evening. I promised to call her. To avoid seeming too eager, I waited 3 days before asking her out again. This time I suggested dinner and dancing at a different venue than Chuck's, and I decided to pick her up for the date. We've scheduled our next date for 2 weeks from last Friday. Although I started dating shortly before Lavon contacted me, it's been about a year since I last had contact with a woman, and I haven't been close to anyone other than Tracy for about 22 years. I have to admit I'm nervous, like a 16-year-old on a first date. I understand that it's like riding a bike, which you will never forget. But every woman is unique. She has her own preferences and desires. I was hoping that I would still be able to navigate the place easily. 22 years later, Tracy was a famous person, but it was uncharted territory. Damn it, Bob. Stop thinking too much. Wow. Lavon met me at the door in a spring floral dress with a scent on the front, with a plunging neckline and a length of about mid-thigh. She wore it flawlessly. I think my jaw dropped. Not cool, Bob. Not cool. The restaurant experience was enjoyable, largely due to the company of my partner. Despite my lack of skill in dancing, the post-dinner dancing was decent, thanks to Lavon's ability to lead. However, I couldn't shake off the feeling of paranoia when I noticed other men glancing at her. This stems from my past experience of losing my wife of 20 years after only 2 days. At one point, Lavon excused herself to the restroom, and I observed 2 men approaching her as she walked across the floor. I felt a surge of anxiety, but managed to stay composed at our table. I reminded myself that not all women were like Tracy, who had left me abruptly. Or were they? When Lavon returned, I mentioned the attention she had garnered and how adeptly she had handled it. She then noticed the lingering impact of my past relationship on me. For 2 decades, I had been confident and secure in my marriage, but now I felt like a wreck. "We're not all like Tracy," she assured me, meeting my gaze. "I don't know the specifics of what happened with her, but I promise I won't abandon you like that. I can't guarantee we'll end up together forever, but if things don't work out, I won't disappear with someone else." Her words brought me a sense of relief, audible in my sigh. The rest of the evening was wonderful, and when I drove her to her house, she invited me in. And lo and behold, we had a wonderful night in bed. "Wow," she whispered, falling asleep in my arms. Little did I know at the time that Lavon had started a new chapter in my life. Although we never got married, we stayed together for 15 years, cherishing every moment. Katie and Rita also hold a special place in my heart. But as I mentioned, this is a story for another time.
That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments about this story. It will be interesting for us to read it. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new, equally interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!